No, they don't really like the question.
Okay, I grant that, but will you grant this, that the survey data, which is very, very consistent, is that in your former homeland, less than 10% of people attend church regularly. In the United States of America, about 40% of us go to church or synagogue every week. Do you grant that America is a more religious country today?
Oh, no, it would be idle to deny. That's part of the reason I wrote the book, is to try and bring those numbers down.
Yes, but do you deny, or do you somehow maintain that America is a great country in spite of its religiosity? America's always been more religious. Isn't that part of the reason that this country is what it is today?
Well, the fact that there can't be a state church and the religion is a voluntary association is certainly a part of the greatness of the United States.
But it's also part of the reason we're more religious, because we have a free market in religion.
Yes, I think that's also true.
All right. I'm speaking with Christopher Hitchens, and we are coming up to a break. He is the author of God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. We are going to be welcoming your calls in a little while. This is clearly one of the most controversial books of our time. It's also a very challenging and very entertaining read. And one of the things that I noted is the Wall Street Journal, in a report on the book, said that many of the people who are buying and reading Christopher Hitchens' books, this book in particular, are religious believers who want to be able to answer his arguments. We'll confront some of those arguments and advance some arguments of our own with the author of the huge bestseller, God is Not Great, Christopher Hitchens.
The Michael daily dose of debate.
Give me more.
The Michael Medved Show.
21 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show, your daily dose of debate. As the gentleman said, right now engaged with a perpetually embattled intellectual. His name is Christopher Hitchens. He is the author most recently of the best-selling book, God is Not Great, and that is God with a small g, How Religion Poisons Everything. Christopher, if I may, the one thing reading through your book that troubled me most, and many of the arguments that people would make against your book, you anticipate very cleverly, but this one I don't think you did, is can you credit the argument that to some extent by combining Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and then even throwing in a chapter about Eastern religions, combining religion in general, that you are letting the Islamo-Nazis, the Islamic killers who you've decried elsewhere, that you're in a sense letting them off the hook by suggesting they're part of some larger problem called religion, rather than specifically indicting them for their participation in one of the most monstrously evil death cults in history?
Well, if I've let them off lightly, I would consider that to be a very stern criticism of the book indeed, and I'll look at it again in that light, because I have to say this charge is one that hasn't been ever made against me. I'm usually accused, if anything, of going on too much about the appalling challenge mounted against our civil society by Islamic Jihad. What I don't like, though, and perhaps this is how we clarify our difference, is this. I don't like people saying these things are done, these appalling crimes, in the name of religion. You notice that there's that soft formulation sometimes employed. They're done because of religion. There's no question in my mind that this is the most faith-based group in the world at present. These are people who really think that religion is to be taken seriously, that it is a preparation for the next world, that it does come from a divine revelation, that Allah's instructions have been issued and must be followed. It's mandate. Now, if you don't believe any of that, and I certainly do not, then it's difficult for me to see how you can say that religion itself is not a problem.
Okay, but you see, you've just done a very cunning, and if you don't mind my saying so, devious rhetorical sleight of hand. You've gone from saying what you and I would agree with, that these are monstrous crimes that are not done in the name of Islam. They are done because of Islam. I agree with you. But Islam is not the same as religion in general. In other words, I would argue that there is a specific and unique destructive nature to fundamentalist, radical Islamo-Nazi ideology today. And that by denying its unique characteristics that contrast very directly with contemporary Christianity in many ways, you are, in effect, letting these folks off the hook.
Let me give you an example of what I'm trying to say, at any rate, and you be the judge of whether I've answered your question fairly. I say in the book, and I've said elsewhere, that if you take the big challenge from Islamic totalitarianism that first alerted me to its extreme danger, the danger of its intervention into our society, namely the warrant for murder that was issued along with an offer of money to suborn the murder by the Ayatollah Khomeini against Salman Rushdie in 1989 on the 14th of February. Now, on that occasion...
Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And probably the worst review he's ever had for his excellent work. Well, now,
yes, it's a thumbs-down review.
There were two ways of thinking about this. One was a frontal assault by a senile, vicious theocrat who'd already run his own society into ruin and despair on our society and our concept of individual rights, free expression, and so forth, and the right to compose works of fiction without being threatened with murder. So the other was that it was blasphemy. Now, the line that the problem was blasphemy, not suborning of murder by theocracy, was taken by the Chief Rabbi of Israel, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, by His Holiness the Pope, by the Cardinal Archbishop of New York. They all said the problem was Rushdie had written a blasphemous book, not that Khomeini had reacted in this terrifying manner. The same reaction was to be found among rabbis and priests of all description in the case of the Danish cartoons. Last year, they all said the problem was the cartoonists and their impiety, not the attempt to destroy the economy and society of a small democratic nation, namely Denmark.
No, wait.
There's a terrible ecumenicism about this. In other words, Michael, if I may say so, your complaint is being wrongly addressed. You should be calling up all the people who say we must have interfaith dialogue with Islam, or we mustn't criticize it, and we mustn't defend its votaries. These are all religious people who say this, not me.
First of all, I don't think they are all religious people by any means. And in other words, part of what, and you're very aware of this. In the bad old days of the Soviet Union, one of the most despicable arguments that was made against confronting the Soviet Union was the argument of moral equivalence, was that because the United States is a terribly imperfect nation, that we had no right to basically stand up against Stalinism. And yet what you're suggesting now is a moral equivalence between the Ayatollah Khomeini condemning Salman Rushdie to death and to some, and by the way, I do not believe that you're accurate in saying that most religious authorities thought that the deepest problem was the blasphemy rather than the death sentence. The death sentence was spoken against by leading religious authorities around the world, was it not?
Occasionally they remembered, as they did with the attempt to sabotage Denmark and burn down Danish embassies and kill random Scandinavians. They did remember to say, of course, we don't like the resort to violence, but the emphasis was hugely the other way, was saying we mustn't defend people of faith. And you may have noticed that not one single magazine or newspaper in the United States dared, or media outlet of any kind, dared to reprint those cartoons. Sometimes out of